I'm not actually going to have a squirrel in this video, but there's something squirrels are doing right now that I don't even think most of us are doing. And I think that's one reason why they're going to be just fine and we're going to struggle to survive. Alright guys, Papa Pepper back once again at the Abundant Harvest Homestead. You know, a lot of my life these days involves parenting. One reason is that I have children. Another reason is that I have 6 of those children at this point. And another reason is that we homeschool our children. With the shutdown of the public schools lately, I'm sure a lot of people are getting a lot of time to teach and interact and be with their children on a regular basis. For some, that may not be exactly ideal. For us, it was part of our goal. And that was just because a couple, like my top 3 identities are who I am to God, the one who created me, who I am to my wife as her husband, and who I am to my children as their father. Because those 3 identities actually come first in my life, and they actually are going to last longer. No matter what I do for a job, one day I'm either going to die or retire, get fired or quit, move on, and that's gonna end. That doesn't happen with my parenting, with my fatherhood. I don't just, quit or retire from being a parent. And because of the way that we treat our marriage, that doesn't happen in our marriage either. A lot of people do just let their marriages die and they move on, and that part of their identity, they become an ex-husband or an ex-wife. It's usually not ideal. It's not what people start out trying to do, but from the get-go, we're going to esteem my wife being my wife and me being her husband to the point that that's very important to us, even more important than a job. Just like our parenting is even going to be more important than a job or whatever we do to make money. I have a whole video on that where I get deeper into, that whole thing. I'll link it in the description or put it as a card at the end of here. But in this one, I wanted to touch on some things that I brought up in the last video. Because in the last video, I spent a while talking about how we, as parents, can provide free food for generations to come because of things like understanding plant propagation, understanding seed saving, knowing grafting, a number of things, even animal husbandry, that if we keep our seeds going, we keep our plants going, we keep our animals growing, then when my children eventually choose to get married, leave home, however it goes down, they could potentially take seeds or animals or whatever with them that they kind of grew up with, or at least the descendants of those seeds, of those animals. And that's kind of cool because then they never have to spend the $4 I did to pick up a packet of seeds. Because they'll have their own. In fact, our kale is going to seed right now. See, if you looked at these here, you might think we almost had some sort of little broccoli that wasn't setting a very big head. But this is actually going to be our kale going to seed. This is kale that we planted last year. It kept itself alive through the winter. And now this second year, it not only fed us last spring and last summer, last fall, last winter, but it's fed us this spring. It'll feed us into this summer, and it's going to seed right now to flower. So once the flowers are pollinated, then it'll go to seed, and that's pretty cool too, because this kale's done really well for us, and the more that we grow it year after year, and the more acclimated to our climate, it kind of becomes, because we're getting seeds from the ones that grew right here, so that's going to work out really well for us. And if you look behind me, you can see a number of trees, okay? This is kind of the point of this video. Those trees, a number of them are oak trees. There's some others out there. But if you'll notice, a lot of times you'll see things like squirrels. Squirrels around here, I don't really like them in my garden, but there's still some pretty cool creatures that we can have in our area, you'll see around. And they'll be ones collecting the nuts. They'll be ones storing the nuts. They'll be ones heading around burying their nuts for later. And the cool thing is that a lot of the trees that get planted can be accidentally planted by things like squirrels. Now, it gets to the point here in my garden where I've even been known to refer to squirrels as the idiots of the woods. I understand they have a purpose. I understand they're cool and they're cute and they're fuzzy. I understand they're, fuzzy-tailed tree rats. They're these rodents that are common in a lot of areas. But I also understand a lot of the things that they do just doesn't make sense. A lot of things they do does not make sense. I guarantee it 100% of the time. We used to, back in Wisconsin, if you caught the video where I was talking about tulips being edible, whereas daffodils are poisonous, and that's why tulips are the ones I like. They would bloom, a tulip would bloom, a squirrel would come up and just shred it and do nothing with it. They could have ate those petals, they could have done something with it, and then they go to the next one and they shred it. And I'm like, what are these fools doing? Really didn't appreciate that, right? But in doing what God designed squirrels to do, they gather nuts. They'll bury nuts and hide nuts, like acorns. That'd be one example. They'll forget about their nuts because, they're kind of the idiots of the woods. And then an oak tree grows. Now, that oak tree takes a while to go from a seedling up to an immature tree, up to a fully mature tree, and eventually wind up to the point it's bearing its own fruit, or nuts in this case, acorns. But then the great-great-great-grandchildren of that squirrel get to come along and eat from what their ancestors planted, what their ancestors left them. So I was kind of waiting for the comments to roll in on that last video about free food for generations and how that works, and just to kind of mention, well, that's the way life always was for a long time. It wasn't uncommon for people to have, their great-grandparents' seeds. It wasn't uncommon for them to be growing things that their ancestors had and to be passing that on with a certain lifestyle generationally. Now we've lost that to a degree in a lot of cultures, especially here in America these days. That's few and far between, I believe. And while humanity is sitting there losing stuff like that, somehow squirrels are still, unintentionally, but just because they're doing what they were designed to do, they are laying up food and providing food for their descendants. Now, if you set me down at a computer and you set a squirrel down at a computer, I think we know who's going to do a better job. If you set me down at a forklift or a backhoe attachment on a front end loader, I think we know who's going to do a better job if it's me versus a squirrel. But yet, in a time where so many people are being crushed because of some of the stuff going on geopolitically in the world these days, and some of the law, or not even laws, but the rules that are coming across, and the demands that people are putting on the lives of others, people are being crushed. And you watch. The squirrels are going to be just fine. So in the midst of everything, I just wanted to provide that as a piece of evidence, a piece of something for you guys to consider. Because as I was talking with my children, it came up that that's what these animals are doing. Squirrels are providing for their descendants. What are we providing for our descendants? A lot of people are so self-centered, they don't. A lot of people, their only real goal is to maybe help their children go to college so that they don't get a ton of debt. They only get some, or something like that. Life is more than what we've let it become. And we don't need to kind of just go with the flow, because the flow isn't exactly good where it's going to go. We kind of chose to opt out of what's become the American dream, where mom has her job, dad has her job, our 2.3 kids go to somebody else for the majority of their waking hours. We get a house we can't afford, some vehicles we can't afford, an education we can't afford, just get heavily strapped in debt and live there. We didn't want that, so we opted out. And it's not too late for anyone to become more focused on what life was really meant to be. I believe all that the squirrels are doing is just doing what they're supposed to do as squirrels. I believe a lot of what we've begun to do is stuff that we're not designed to do. It's not the way the world is supposed to work. And that's why I just want to get back to being a godly husband and father. That's why I just want to get back to providing food for my family, for generations even. That's why I just want to get back. You know, when the world was perfect, it was a man and his wife in a garden with some animals. Then they started having kids. If it was good enough for when the world was perfect, I don't mind being a man with a wife in a garden with some animals, raising my children there. So, just as the point of this video, squirrels, guys. Squirrels are taking care of their descendants. If they can do it, I think we can too. But it may take doing something different than what's become common these days. Alright, I'll see you guys next time with something else. Pop out.